Hey YouTube, welcome to Freedom Life Work.
Preview.
Today we're going to look at 5 big contradictions of the Bible. They're going to be so glaring and blatant that even any Christian will seriously start to doubt their faith. Alright? First up, we have the mustard seed parable. And I'm sure some of you have heard this contradiction, but I'll take it one step further today with the Greek manuscript to prove my point. So, in Matthew chapter 13, 31 to 32, verses 31 to 32, Jesus is to have claimed that the mustard seed is the smallest of all seeds and that it grows to be the largest of garden plants once it becomes a tree. Now, when we look further into this claim, we can see that the mustard seed is not actually the smallest seed of all seeds. In fact, the orchid seed is even smaller than the mustard seed. So, how is this possible? How could Jesus, the supposed God, be incorrect in making a factual claim? Well, here's a Christian argument. They'll say that Jesus was somehow only referring to the smallest seed in the land of Palestine at the time. So somehow that makes out Jesus to be speaking the truth according to Christian explanations. The problem with this Christian argument is that nowhere in the Bible does it say that Jesus was only speaking about all the seeds in only Palestine. Where is this specific claim in the Bible with Jesus talking about the smallest seed of Palestine? Where is it? You won't find it. Try looking it up. It's nowhere there, and Christians will just say that's the explanation. No, it's so taking it one step further, we can see in the interlinear Bible the original translation from Greek. We see the word all mentioned in the Bible means all, the whole, every kind of. Where is Palestine mentioned in the Greek manuscript? There is no mention of Palestine referring to this verse Jesus talking about. There's no mention of Palestine at all. Since there's no mention of Palestine in the text, that means Jesus was talking about the mustard seed being the smallest seed of all seeds in the entire world. So what kind of God gets the facts wrong? Obviously, this is an incorrect statement, and Jesus didn't know what he was talking about according to the Bible. The second is the marriage parable. The verses in question is Matthew chapter 22 verse 30 versus Revelation chapter 21 verse 9 and Ephesians chapter 5 verse 25 to 27. Jesus is said to have claimed that no marriage will occur in heaven in Matthew. Yet in Revelations, there is mention of the Lamb, aka Jesus, standing with his wife in heaven. In Revelations. So how is it that Jesus can be married to someone in heaven, but Jesus just claimed before that no marriage will occur in heaven? How is that possible? How can you say there's no marriage that's going to happen in heaven, yet he's married in heaven? How does that make any sense? Jesus would then be lying about there being no marriage in heaven. Now, the Christian would argue and say, they'd bring up Ephesians and say that marriage is meant to be metaphorically speaking, and that the bride symbolizes the church that Jesus will be married to in heaven. Okay. So let's go with that then. Let's say metaphorically speaking or not. Let's say metaphorically speaking or not. Doesn't that still count as marriage? Right? So then Jesus will be married to his bride in heaven metaphorically or literally. He will then be married to his church in heaven metaphorically or literally. Yet, Jesus claimed that no marriage will occur in heaven metaphorically or literally. I mean, cut it any way you want. Jesus says out of his mouth, no marriage will occur in heaven, but yet he's married. So to refute the Christian argument, why then is Jesus marrying his church in heaven when he said there will be no marriage in heaven, metaphorically or literally? You try to wrap your head around that, there's no way that makes sense at all. It's a bunch of bogus crap. So that would be lie number 2 that Jesus made. Next is the confusion of faith versus deeds. Many Christians will say doing good deeds won't get you into heaven. They'll claim that only faith will allow you to enter God's kingdom. So that means that you can be a douchebag to every person on the planet and still be saved because you had faith in God, just because you only had faith. So you can murder, rape, steal all day long and you're still good to go. I mean, good deeds doesn't matter at all, right? So as Paul says in Galatians 2, chapter 2, verse 15-16, only faith will get you into heaven. He mentions that by the works of law, no one will be justified. So basically, doing good deeds won't count for anything in God's eye, according to Paul. But in a letter Paul wrote earlier in Romans chapter 2, verse 3, Paul is saying the exact opposite thing. He now says that God will repay each person according to what they have done. So if I do good deeds, God will repay me in good now? I thought Paul said that in another verse that works don't matter. So then if my works don't matter, why would God repay me back in good if I did good works? We can clearly see Paul is contradicting himself and making up stories. What else is more troubling is that Paul also contradicts with the book of James, where James states that faith without deeds is dead. Meaning, faith alone won't get you into heaven. So now you have 2 authors here who contradict one another. I mean, doesn't this seriously make you question the Bible with this many problems popping up? But Christians will say that you can do good deeds, this is an optional thing, but ultimately faith will get you into heaven. So then you can ask that Christian, so Then, can I steal your Sunday tithes at church every week and still go to heaven as long as I believe in God? What you'll find here is Christians who refuse to accept the book of James and have no choice but to push Paul's contradictions onto other people because they don't know what they're talking about. Then comes a matter of children being punished by God for the parent's sin. God says in Deuteronomy 5, chapter 5, verse 9, that he will punish children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate him. Yet in Ezekiel chapter 18, verse 1 to 30, it mentions that children will not be punished for the parent's sin, nor will parents be punished for the children's sin. Obviously, these claims fly against each other and cause utter confusion. I mean, how is that God can say that he will punish children for the parent's sin in one chapter, but then in another chapter he says that he will not punish children for the parent's sin? So that sounds like another big contradiction to me. But what if God changed his mind about the subject? About punishing children? Well, that leads me into my next point, which is in Hebrews chapter 6, verse 17 to 18. In the New International Version, it mentions that God has an unchanging nature. In the New Living Translation, it mentions the same verse as God never changing his mind. Don't you think that God decided to punish children to the third and fourth generation for the parent's sin is now changing his mind not to punish children anymore for the parent's sin? Don't you think God's changing his mind? Well, according to that verse in Hebrew I just showed you, God doesn't have a changing nature. But we see here that's not the case. God does, in fact, according to the Bible, have a changing nature, which makes the Bible to be false in this regard. Also, how is it possible the God of the Old Testament, who demands an eye for personal injury, is all of a sudden telling others to turn the other cheek when struck? What am I talking about? I'm talking about the Old Testament verses from Exodus chapter 21 verse 23 and comparing it to Jesus in the New Testament Matthew chapter 5 verse 39. Doesn't it seem like so many commandments in the Old Testament have now been diluted or dialed back with the teachings of the New Testament? Doesn't this show God's changing nature? Changing from strict and vindictive to docile and unresisting. How can Hebrews say that God has an unchanging nature when in fact the Bible from the Old Testament to the New Testament shows God instead having a changing nature? Plus, it mentions that God cannot lie in Hebrews. So if God cannot lie, but we find contradictions throughout the Bible, what does that mean? Does that mean God is telling the truth by telling you opposite things of the same thing? Or is it more like lying according to the Bible? So I'll leave you with that. Are you still willing to accept answers from Christianity when things still don't make sense?